Hey athletes, it's Kathleen here from Eat Love Triathlon, and we are really excited today to have a special guest with us, Jessica Myers-Adams with Extreme Relationship Fitness. Jessica is a marriage relationship expert with 8 years of experience working with couples to recreate joy and connection in their relationship. With Extreme Relationship Fitness, which launched in 2020, Jessica hones in on athletes to equip them with the tools to better communicate with their partners for mutual understanding, foster mental toughness, and create a safe environment for the guilt-free pursuit of their athletic passions. Outside of working individually with athletes and running relationship boot camps for couples, Jessica can be found training for endurance events or cooking up her next big adventure with her wife of 10 years. She is based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and accepts clients both virtually and in person. So Jessica, both Dawn and I are super excited to be speaking with you today because we actually went through some major ups and downs in our relationship. The more and more Dawn got into triathlon, it just got tougher and tougher for us. So with a lot of work, working with a couples therapist, we were able to kind of get where we are today. So our relationship isn't perfect, but it's so much better than where it was when, way back when he first started all of this. So we're excited because it kind of touches us personally, what you're doing with athletes and their relationships.
Yeah, that's so great to hear that you've overcome it and you have a sense too then of what's necessary. This morning I heard something. I was on a call and somebody was talking about maintenance, and I hadn't really heard of this, or I hadn't really thought of this term maintenance, but they were talking about the way to keep something moving forward was to keep up on maintenance. And I was just thinking in this capacity, it was just like doing something little each day, but when they talked about maintenance, they were talking about like changing spark plugs, like doing some, like picking a thing and then keeping consistent with that. So,
Right.
you and Don, and then in my marriage, I need to keep doing those things continually to keep up the maintenance of the relationship.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us the main thing was that I think I was oblivious to how Kathleen was really feeling, and I think that was something that caught me off guard, caught me off surprise, just because I was like, "Whoa, what's the big deal?" And so I think that was a big thing in my mind is that just I had no clue what the issue was or why it was upsetting Kathleen so much.
And I didn't do a good job of verbalizing that. So I
Mhm.
think we're going to talk a little bit maybe about communication.
That's the number one thing, of course, with athletes or any in my private practice as a therapist for couples. That's the number one complaint is communication.
Yeah.
For us athletes, we have a little bit more specific issues, but it all stems around that.
Yeah.
Problem.
So what led you to start honing in your practice and focusing on athletes and their relationships?
Yeah. So I'm a couples therapist, and I've had the training in that for a better part of the decade. But as I was working through, just like you and Don, working through my own relationship issues, being an athlete, I was learning a lot. And I was also, you know, keying into what the problems were in my marriage and feeling like I could really offer a service to athletes who were going to be going through this, like you and Don. You can always find well, I don't want to say you can always find a good therapist. You can find a good couples therapist if you do your homework, making sure that they see a lot of couples, that they have experience with, the certain thing you're dealing with. But you can't Google right now help for athletes in relationships. Well, actually you can now because you might find me. But prior to that, I had done my research and there wasn't someone who was really specializing in this. So that's why during the pandemic, I launched another website and created the second business to really work with athletes specifically.
I think that's awesome. When things were pretty rocky for us, it was before we were married. I don't even think we were engaged yet, but we had been dating for a few years. And things were just so bad and I didn't really know where to turn. So I turned to Google and I Googled I think I Googled divorce and endurance athletes, and all
Wow.
sorts of crazy stuff came up. And my head started spinning, my mind was like, oh my goodness. And nothing necessary. And it would, and everything I read, it wasn't that it ended good. It ended in divorce. I guess that's what I Googled and that's what I found, but it was these relationships breaking up, and it was definitely an athlete and a non-athlete, just like us, in the relationship. So I felt like I really didn't have anything to read on the internet or anything to kind of help me in a positive way. So it's awesome. I think that this is the road that you're going down. So you're offering help to couples that are either, I guess, both athletes, or one's an athlete and one's not.
When I was doing the research to create the website and figure out what the pain points were, I was doing some, we call market research, just in interviewing athletes and getting a sense of what their issue was. I was searching for terms, and I put, something similar to that. And I found this really big, this term that I've now really read a lot about, and they say, like, divorce by triathlon. You can
Yes,
Google
yes,
Right.
yeah.
there's nothing positive that said
No.
if your partner's doing this, it's headed down the bad path, and that's just not true. Obviously, it's not true for both of us. Still doing now. I think one thing I thought about this morning when I knew I was talking to you, I just read an article in, I think it was what's the triathlete? The one,
Triathlete magazine.
I don't know, is that what it's called? You get with your membership for the U.S.
Yeah, it is Triathlete magazine. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. I was reading that it was talking about how many full Ironman you should do in a year, and is there a cap? And they had some recommendations that, by the way, they said it was 2. That's for maybe some people could do more. And I would say that there's also a cap for couples and for partners doing, big endurance competitions. I was talking to a triathlete at the end of last year, and he was talking about the agreement that he and his wife had. And he said that only one of them should do an Ironman at the same time, like to be training for it, because how much dedication it takes, and
Right.
Who's going to watch the kids. And so I think that was athlete and athlete, but there are more athlete and non-athlete couples that I would see. And I think that having that agreement, what is the limitations? Because if you're going from one race to another event, it just sometimes doesn't work. And so there has to be some sacrifice. I think we want to do as many as we can, for sure.
Right.
There can't be no breaks and no time to reconnect and no time to work on the relationship.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think Dawn just finished Ironman Coeur d'Alene, and leading up to that, just the number of hours training per week, and what that looks like for us. And we don't have small children at home. It's just the 2 of us. But, the more he's working full time, then he's, training 15 to 17 hours a week. And so more of the stuff at home is falling on me. And every Friday night is prepping for, a road trip to go find hills. And all day Saturday is, him training and, getting close to the Ironman. I'm just like, man, I'm tired of this. I want to have Friday nights back. I want to have Saturdays back, and just kind of get our routine back. And so and I think you kind of get to your point too, where it's like,
Right.
I'm ready to race and do this. But yeah, it's interesting to do several full Ironmans in a year. I think that would be even a lot on us. So without the small children involved.
Yeah, it would be very difficult if we had kids. I don't know how people do it, honestly. What do you, I guess one of the questions I had was, what are kind of some of the warning signs that your relationship might be, not where it should be, or heading in the wrong direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we're talking about, one of the big ones right now, is that training takes all of your time and you don't contribute to the relationship or the family. Of course, training is going to take a big part of your time. This is similar. I think triathlon training and the divorce rate correlates with people working too much. Now, we're not professional athletes, but you have to think about the person who's working, more than 12 hours a day. They don't even get to see their family. Their family and their relationship really suffers. So I think not seeing, if you never see your partner, that's a big warning sign. If you're missing out on all the life events. Now, certainly I think on a Friday night, if you're training and you have a big ride on Saturday or a big run, you may opt out not to go do something, and that makes sense. But if you're not attending any of those things and you have your nose down and working super hard, I think that's a big warning sign.
Right.
I think here's one that's a little more subtle, and this is the one where I see relationships starting to go downhill, is that you miss out on the realities of your relationship. And what I mean by that is you don't see that your partner is rolling their eyes or frustrated, or they're not their bubbly self. Like Don, you mentioned like you didn't really know. And so we just
Right.
don't notice those things. Sometimes we're just really super hyper focused on something, and then those realities aren't existent. And if they are, the other big pitfall is that people will avoid them
Right.
because they think if you could see it clearly sometimes, but then you're afraid to bring it up because if you bring up something, it's probably going to go downhill. So you keep that to yourself and you avoid things. And that is one of the, that's a guaranteed way to stay in the problem because no one's talking about it.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly where I was. I didn't know what to do or how to kind of solve it, or because I just, I didn't want to upset Kathleen, but I wanted to do training. But so it was really hard to find that balance of, me being able to be honest. And it was all me. I mean, Kathleen was very understanding, very, she, definitely.
Not in the beginning.
Yeah, well, but, I was afraid to say anything. I just didn't want to upset her. I didn't, conflict is not a strong point in my just coping with, relationships. So I avoided it. And that was wrong on my part to not kind of work it out and just lay it on the table, and that we can both kind of, compromise and come up with a plan. So, and that's what we ended up doing is one of the things that one of our counselors, the counselor that we mainly saw, was to have a weekly meeting, business meeting, so that we would, talk about life stuff in my training. Okay, this is my week. This is what it's going to look like. Do we have anything that is going to conflict with that? And I can move things around, or I can do something later, or I can skip a workout because this is important to you. So things like that, I think, were helped us kind of, at least come to some kind of agreement, so that we're not on both ends of the spectrum trying to make each other do what we want to do. It's about communication, like you said.
Great. Yeah. So avoiding is a big, and we can certainly talk about some of the things that you can do to work on that. But I think it's such a way of approaching things for some people that there's this almost groove that, like, when there's a conflict, they will go the opposite way. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because the consequences in that person's mind, probably for you, were much worse to do something rather than do nothing about it.
Right.
So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
I think for me, I made up stories in my head, which, we do this in all parts of our life. But I think one of the stories I made up, and I truly felt in the very beginning, is that Dom loved triathlon more than he loved me. And I think that in our relationship, we were working individually versus together, especially when it came to his training and his racing and what he wanted to do, what his dreams and his goals were. I really didn't know any of it. And so I just felt so individualized in our relationship. And I think at times he did too. So I know that you talked about communication being one of the biggest things that you see in couples, just not having the great communication. But what are some of the other big issues that you see athletes facing or having to deal with when it comes to their partner?
I think that quality time is a big one, which relates to this, right? So couples come to therapy because they have some kind of reason, some kind of thing they're trying to decide on, something that has come up. Money, and I think this relates to endurance and triathlon too. It's a lot of money. And
Yes.
sometimes because of this avoidance, or because people are walking on eggshells, they start to make unilateral decisions. I mean, I think you can trace all this, by the way, back to communication, but they start to make unilateral decisions. Or there's this term, and I wouldn't use it for necessarily coaching, but just as a therapist, financial infidelity happens then, right? Because we're not talking about what things we want to spend money on, just like we're not talking about what races we're going to sign up for, or getting just being on the same page about things. People start to make these unilateral decisions, and then that's going to eventually catch up, but they don't see it that way in the beginning. So I think those are a lot of the big things. Chores, the parenting, different parenting styles. Those kind of things come up too.
Yeah, I think everything you mentioned, it just resonates, because again, that was kind of a sticking point too for a while, is all the finances when it comes to triathlon, all the gear, the race, the amount of money to sign up for races and things, and it starts to become or feel off balance, like one's getting more than the other. And I hate to be like that, because it sounds so childish, but it's more of a feeling of being left out, I think. And you feeling like, I always felt like, oh, well, he's getting that, but I don't feel like there's enough money left over for me to do this kind of a thing. And again, those were just things that, stories I was creating in my mind, and not being able to communicate. So again, like you said, I think it all comes down to communication. I think Dawn had talked a little bit about feeling, well, you didn't actually say this, but I know you felt it. He felt, I think, guilty a lot of the time for training, because he didn't know exactly how I was going to react to it, or how it was going to make me feel, and kind of just felt stuck. He didn't really know how to tell me, this is what I have on the training schedule. And so do you find that you see athletes that are in that situation where the athlete feels guilty, or he or she doesn't know how to communicate those things to their partner?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that came up when I was seeing some of the athletes during we're coming out of the crisis of COVID, was that they weren't able to do things that they would have done. No, I don't want to say secretively, but they would have gone and trained after work. They would have created these places where they didn't necessarily say things, and they could sort of get away with it and not have the guilt. And so I think when you really are feeling stuck, there's a certain way, just with this, similar to a person who usually tends to avoid. There's steps that we'll start to take to get moving in the direction of engaging. The first step, believe it or not, is not just to speak up, because you have to formulate your thoughts. I mean, this sounds really simple, but I work with partners and with couples in identifying what are they thinking. And so in the guilt arena, right, it's asking yourself, like, why do you feel guilty? Maybe there is some reason that you should feel guilty. Are you always tired when you're with your partner? Are you slacking on the chores? Maybe you're taking them for granted. So those are some of the things that make a person feel guilty. So are there any things that you can first off do to remedy that guilt for yourself? Or is your partner projecting that onto you? Maybe you don't own the guilt. Maybe you really are still doing the things that you want to do, but because you're living out your excitement and they don't have something that they're doing, sometimes that happens. The partners are really enmeshed and they're having a great time together, and that's wonderful. But eventually couples have to separate that enmeshment and then each have something that they bring to the table. So now as an athlete, you've found this thing that gives you passion, and you're pursuing that, and you still are, because you're a driven, incredible person, which, a lot of these athletes they can get up and do their training, super early and still do the chores. And so those people, maybe they shouldn't feel guilty. So I think for them, it's being able to work through, like, I'm doing something that makes me happy. Here's where you have to be careful not to criticize, but asking your partner, like, well, what are you doing? What's making you feel fulfilled?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing, because Kathleen didn't really have an outlet. I had an outlet, but she just didn't have an outlet. And I think, she has found ways to create things that she wants to do and likes to do. And so that was huge. I mean, it was, but yeah, I think she just, I would be either training or doing this, and she's like home vacuuming the floor or doing grocery shopping.
Grocery
She's
shopping,
like,
yeah.
this isn't fair right here.
Yeah.
And so, I'm out having fun, and she's home working or doing the chores. And so, yeah, it was definitely, we just had to kind of find balance. And I think it was important for her to find something that she was passionate about. So,
Yeah.
to help with that.
Yeah, because when we first, when we were dating early on, Don was just doing some 5Ks, some 10Ks. I mean, he really wasn't into triathlon. And then he did a sprint, and then it just kind of snowballed, and it became more and more and more. But I think, like you were saying, we were kind of enmeshed, and we were always like this. And then all of a sudden he was like this. And I didn't have anything. And I did, again, that's kind of where I think he loves triathlon more than me. Every time, he's always looking for that opportunity to go train, and not really, again, we were working kind of separately in the relationship, and not talking and communicating. So yeah, that totally sounds like us.
Well, it's wonderful. Actually, this is really wonderful for the two of you that triathlon helped your relationship develop. Because what I have found over the years is that not as much I haven't seen as many athletes in this capacity, because they're coming and they have that specific problem you're talking about. But the couple goes through stages that are predictable. And the first stage, which you did talk about, is enmeshment. And it's wonderful. It's the honeymoon phase. It is fantastic. It's what makes people go to couples therapy later, because they feel like that relationship is really important to them. So, you become enmeshed, and then you have to, for a relationship to mature, for each person to have something that they're excited about. And so, seeing a lot of couples over the years that when one starts to develop into their own separate person again, because we have to have two separate people in a relationship, the other partner feels like they're being left behind, and they cling to and try to pull back the partner, guilt them, becomes competition and those things. And those things are things that all relationships go through. Usually it's about the 2-year mark that people are, coming out of the honeymoon stage, and they're starting to say, I want to spend time with my friends, or I want to, do this hobby or get into this thing.
Yeah, I think it probably was around 2 years, or maybe a little bit longer. But the one thing I wanted to say, and I don't want to forget to say it, is that when Dawn and I did go to couples therapy, we weren't married yet, and I don't even know if we were engaged. We may have been, but I don't think so. And so I just want other people to understand that it's okay, to do this without being married, without being engaged. And it's okay to go to couples therapy and get the help so you can strengthen your relationship, so you can move forward in a good way. So
yeah, I'm glad you say that, because the research shows expert marriage therapist John Gottman did some research, and he did a big research project over years. He found that the average couple waits 7 years before they go to couples therapy.
And sometimes it's too late by then. You're just done. You've already made these, decisions in your head. So yeah, so good. I wanted to say that.
Great.
So do you have some specific tips that athletes can do to improve their relationship? Any specific, things that they can do to make improvements, or if they're struggling, anything like that?
Absolutely. Well, so aside from the communication, which we could break down a little bit, because there's some specific ways to to um, to progress through being able to bring something up. Because a person who is
Right.
avoiding all the time, it's like going from 0 to 100 to be able to say, "Hey, this is going on. How do we deal with this?" That is climbing Mount Everest for a
Right.
lot of folks, right?
Right.
So we could talk a little bit about how to start training so that you could summit that peak. But as far as improving a relationship, these are the things that we honestly all know. But couples, when they're into this conflict stage, they don't want to do it. They know what to do, but they don't want to do it. It's giving appreciations. I have a lot of my partners start off a session. Can you tell your partner something that you appreciate that they did for you, or something you appreciate about them? And to even make it more meaningful, tell them why it was meaningful to you. It's really nice when you say, "Hey, thanks for emptying the dishwasher," but that's courtesy. Saying thanks for emptying the dishwasher, I felt like I didn't have enough time today. That's letting them know why it was meaningful. So I think giving the
Right.
appreciation and the why behind it.
Okay.
If you learn your partner's love language, you'll be speaking the same language, which is fantastic. I remember when my partner and I read the 5 love languages. Gary Chapman wrote it. It's a game changer, because you're trying to do things for your partner, and all they want is the words of affirmation. So
Right.
learning their love language would go far. I think, doing the things you did when you were first dating, leaving notes, texting them, touching them, it's of course all those positive things. And then avoiding the negative behaviors, the criticism, the blaming, and, finger pointing, those kinds of things.
You.
Right.
And I would say, because we're talking about avoidance, I want to just mention that one of the things that is, if you want to improve, would be not to be resentfully compliant. So if that makes sense.
Okay.
So some
Yes.
of the time when
Yes.
when couples are trying to break out of this stage, it happens to look like this then. And so this partner is resentfully compliantly going along with things, instead of learning how to speak up and say, "I don't like this," or "This isn't comfortable for me." So I think that's a way to improve the relationship too.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah.
What did you say that term was?
Yeah, resentfully
Resentfully
compliant.
compliant. Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
What do you see, when athletes are training, especially for a long distance race, again, the training hours are ramping up quite a bit and they're working full time. And and I feel like the athlete sometimes can get buried in that and have a hard time coming back to, thanking and, saying why they're thankful for what their partner did, or just, doing these little things that you mentioned. Do you have any tips on how to kind of keep your head in the game? I know probably lots of practice, lots of maintenance, like you were saying in the very beginning, but anything specific?
Yeah, I think that having a specific practice, one of the things that I would say is, maybe you can't do date night, right? But a colleague of mine created this term, date state. And
Mm.
it's getting in the mind frame of having a date, especially if you have young kids or something like that. So it's just
Right.
creating time that you and your partner are spending together. And that doesn't have to be in the evening if your partner has to get up early to train, but it's, on their recovery day, or it's scheduling the time to just connect. And it doesn't have to be a lot, especially when you're in full force training. If you are in the throes of training, then hopefully you and your partner, if you're doing the work, can communicate about that. Like, I loved your the idea that you got from your work, where you set up like a meeting to talk about it. So
Right.
just having that, that time, I think that is the maintenance. So having a plan is really, really important. Not everybody can go on a date every week. I get that, but
Right.
it's like, one day a week. For athletes, this doesn't make sense to have coffee and donuts, with their partner. But that's what I used to tell my couples. That's what I used to tell my couples. And I think now it's for you guys, it's finding something creative that you can do to put time in. Not going to the grocery store together, not folding
Right.
laundry together, not those things, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Going back to what you had said, when that about the, affirming, thanking, and giving a why. So what do you think the reason, they know what to do, but why don't they take the action? What's the stumbling block or the limiting belief that why don't they do that?
I think it depends on which side they're on, because if they're resentful, they're not doing it because they're resentful, or they're feeling like they're not, like, I'm waiting for my partner who's fallen in love with this other thing, because they have. I mean, that's a real, like, legit complaint or whatever,
Right.
or feeling. So they're resentful and they don't want to do it because they think they shouldn't have to. That's, I
Right.
think. And then I think for some of the athletes who just get really swept up into this new love, which will eventually calm down too, they'll eventually find balance and regulate themselves with triathlon, or they may not, and then they may be one of those people that Kathleen and I were reading about, death by triathlon, because you don't take a breather and you don't look up and you become, I don't think it's actually as a frequent occurrence. I think that
I agree.
it's the idea that they've fallen in love with triathlon, and that's the biggest upset. They'll come out on the other side, just like we did when we were in the honeymoon stage.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a good point, is because I did eventually, and whether we went to counseling or not, I'm not sure if it would have changed, or I think it would have changed, but I think I did see that progression of, okay, this is kind of extreme. I need to kind of bring myself back. And so I think that, knowing that, and maybe the non-athlete being patient and realizing that, it's going to kind of come back around, but it's hard when you're in the middle of it to really see that or know that, I guess.
And I don't think you do. And I don't think that's anybody, I don't think that's something they're doing wrong. It's perfectly healthy to, it's just like the honeymoon stage. You're just falling in love with it. And then, so if you think about when we fell in love with our mate, we didn't realize that we're spending all of our free time obsessing about that mate. You know what I mean? We're on the phone, we're texting, we're just like thinking about it, doing nice little things. And it was, it was consuming. And so it eventually calms down.
That's true. Yeah, when you mention it like that.
Get butterflies over your bike. I remember when I bought my bike that was, a couple grand. It was like, this is the greatest bicycle. I could buy a car with this,
Right.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say something and now I lost it, but it'll come back, I guess, if it needs to. Do you have any other questions, Dawn? Anything you want to mention?
I think the biggest thing is, I guess I guess speak to the athlete that needs to learn how to communicate to the spouse that isn't, the athlete, or isn't the athlete, and how they can, and then I guess speak to the non-athlete, how they can maybe phrase things, or I guess if you're a non-athlete, what's the best tact to use to talk to the athlete? And then if you're the athlete, how can you best communicate? And I know everybody's communication style is different, but what are you seeing as far as the needs of the athlete from the non-athlete, and then the non-athlete to the athlete?
Yeah. Well, we can make it really, it's a great question. I think we can make it a general or a generic kind of way to go about it. So there's the person who's bringing up something, and then there's the person who's listening, right? So we categorize it in that way. And so if you're the person that's bringing something up, that's you're talking about yourself and you're self-defining, right? And I think that's where the avoidant personality type can get into trouble, because they're not able to identify what they're thinking or what their concern is and bring it about. And I think there's a continuum of like how this goes from I wish they'd keep it to themselves, or I'll bring something up, and being able to bring it up and talk about it, right? And so the person who's avoiding talking about something, whether that's the the wannabe cheerleader, the person who should be cheering their partner on, they would first want to just recognize why they're upset, or the person, the athlete who's like, why is my partner upset? Like, starting to formulate, what do you want to say? I think that's, if we're going to talk about, like I was saying, scaling Everest, it's starting with, first off, getting clear about what your concern is or what you want to bring up, and getting specific about that too, because sometimes we'll globalize or be vague. I want you to stop. I want you to be home more. Well, that's not helpful to, that's not good communication. So you want to get clear about, like, what is it that you want? Hey, I would like for you to help with some of the chores. And I'd even get more specific, about what it is that you're looking for. And then when you do bring up something, you can talk about your own self. Avoids blaming, accusing, or name calling, or any, not that we do those things necessarily, but there's a lot of finger pointing that happens, and it's accidental. It's, you're always you're always training, and that's not going to get through to somebody, because they're going to be defensive. Instead you might say, like, I feel really alone. I feel like I have to do all of these things by myself. I feel like I have no support, and I don't feel very loved right now. That's a way different way to say it than you're never home. And for the athlete who's trying to pursue their passion and feels guilty, it might be bringing up, I think if you say, I feel guilty, their partner will be like, good, you should, but it's I think it's again getting clear about, I feel like you've been upset and angry. And yeah, because you're always doing triathlon, and you're always training. And so you might just say, well, what would you want us to be doing if I was home more often? And I think that'll stump a lot of the partners, because they just know that they don't like sometimes what's going on. They don't have their own thing yet. And so you can help them, discover that.
Yeah, those are great answers, because it is so easy to finger point, and sometimes it's really hard to figure out how to say it without saying, well, like you said, you're never home, you're always doing triathlon, you're not helping me, things like that, so it's hard to, if you don't have help to, manage your words, it's hard to figure it out on your own, how to reframe those statements, I guess. So that's great. Yeah. And it's hard to look inside and ask those questions, like, why am I feeling this way? Because a lot of the time it does come back to us. And again, I was kind of making up stories, or I didn't have my own thing. And sometimes that's hard, to look inside and kind of take that on, and see that it's not all the other person's fault, that we're contributing to some of that too. So I think it's good to have a couples therapist to help, weed through all of that.
Yeah. And for people that are not necessarily wanting to do therapy, and digging into the past and all those things, that's why, being a relationship coach, also, it's helping people move forward and developing these communication skills. And we don't, not everybody needs to dig into their whole past, all of those, hurts and things. So that's why I like, you can definitely find a relationship coach too, that will help you with communication and those kind of things.
You're like the coach / referee.
Right. Well, I think it's, it's not that you have to, and I agree, it's developing the tools necessary so that you don't have to go to counseling all the time to kind of work it out. It's developing the tools so that you as a couple can work it out and, learn how to communicate better and be understanding. Yeah. So.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I was thinking with the referee thing, I do certainly have people have to say, let's slow down and those kind of things. But I think of myself more as you're talking about, Don, as a coach who will help couples develop these skills so they can do that. I know a lot of people who I've seen who have gone to different other, clinicians or whatever, they did get some help going to some kind of, intermediate, like, some kind of referee, but then they just worked out that one thing and they didn't develop the skills, because it is really difficult for us to bring up things, because our emotional brain gets involved almost immediately. As soon as my partner says, there's a continuum for listening, and the continuum is number 1 or 0 is I wish they'd keep it to themselves. A number 4 is I look for solutions and I try to fix it right away. And I guess in between that is being defensive. But having the tension of having difference is so hard, and it's a skill that we have to build up. I kept getting stuck on number 4. My spouse says something and I'm like, well, what can we do about it? And I just try to fix it rather than we both talk about it and what is the best solution for both of us, you know?
Yeah, it did take us a while, because I think that's the thing. When we were kind of in the midst of everything, it was, excuse me, we hadn't developed the skills. And so it was like, I think we need to call Brenda or Barbara.
Deborah.
Yeah, Deborah. And so, yeah, I think that was the thing, is it's a learning process, just like anything else, just like triathlon. You've got to learn how to develop skill to be, a better swimmer, a better biker, better runner. So it's the same thing applies to relationships. It's a learning process for sure.
Yeah. I guess when I said referee, I was kind of thinking in the sense of you can sit there and see us from the outside. So if I'm saying too much of, well, don this, don that, don this, you can, whoa, Kathleen, and then make me kind of look into myself and how I'm contributing. Yeah. So,
well, it sounds like you had good help, because there are a lot of, helpers who will see couples and they will help them by telling each person what to do. And I definitely don't want to tell anyone, I don't want to tell anyone what they need to do, or I want them to come up with their creative solutions. But first they have to develop, those skills to bring things up in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And Dawn has a good point too, just like I was saying, you don't have to wait until you're engaged or, married to seek counseling, but you can also, it doesn't mean you just go once and you quit, you finish, or you're finished or whatever, because we would be away from counseling for a little bit and something would come up, and then we'd schedule some more sessions, to help get us through, whatever was going on, to help us again with our communication, kind of just going through everything that we had learned, but helping us, work on those skills. So, yeah.
Great.
So I guess we can kind of wrap up here. I wanted to ask you, what can clients expect from a session with you? So what does that look like?
Yeah, well, it's really breaking down this mammoth, undertaking of bringing things up. It's okay. So I think, sometimes we will get advice from people. We'll just bring it up, but how in the world can you just bring something up if you've been, walking on eggshells and you're afraid to do that? So it's learning those skills and breaking it down to, again, those, this will sound, simple, but I have to recognize why I'm upset first. And that's, I think, taking a big goal and making it, 50% and 25%, and then working on hey, what's a 1% improvement? And there's some things that we can do to specifically get at that. And I think that's where, coaching is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, great. Before we wrap up completely, I just wanted to mention for you athletes that Jessica is giving away a great free resource. So this is for athletes who are wanting to improve their relationship, and it's called How Mental Toughness Can Help Your Relationship: The 4 C's of Mental Toughness to Change Your Marriage Now. Or your relationship, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that it's available to you. We'll provide the link for you, so you can go ahead and download the free resource. And I think we actually have the link in here. I'll just verbally say it. It's going to be extremerelationshipfitness.com/eat-love-try. So we'll make sure that we post that link, and it's available for you athletes to click on it and download that. So any last, one thing before we wrap up, I wanted to make sure that athletes know how to get in touch with you. So if they want to reach out or they want to find you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I have a website, extremerelationshipfitness.com. So you can go there, and there's a link to schedule a call with me and get started. We could at least see what it is. I might even be able to help you without seeing, a person, is just to give them that first kind of step to take.
Okay, awesome.
Cool.
Any last words?
I would say, what can we do to improve now? I think there's a ripple effect for what you do. If you're waiting and you're resentful, or you're waiting, or you're afraid to say something, just do something. It's kind of like when some athletes who never ran before, they had to take the first, step, run to the mailbox. So I think it's just going over to your partner and saying something nice, or it's just doing something to make it go in that direction of positivity.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Jessica. Well, thank you so much. It was great speaking with you today.
Thank you. It was,
Yeah.
it was great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.